Wow, it's amazing. The
What?
Wandering Pilgrim back on the air. How did that happen? Yeah, we haven't really done regular shows lately, except for the Universalist show, and even that's been kind of off and on. It's kind of cool just to have a little half hour here and there just to talk about it. So, tell me how God is simple and easy to understand.
Are you asking me a question now?
No, I'm being a douche right now. Actually, of course, that's not what divine simplicity is about. It's not about God being understandable or simple like that. What we're talking about is He's not
Right.
made of moving parts. There's not a bunch of cogs and gears going on, right?
Right.
So, lay out your understanding, if you would.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
Or
So,
I could give a
I,
simple definition if you like.
sure. Yeah, that'd be good. I wasn't planning
Okay.
on being the first one talking. So.
All right, that's cool. I understand. It was kind of ad hoc anyway. Um, so my understanding of divine simplicity, and it's not something I really claim to fully understand. It's something I still wrestle with. That's rare for me to say that because there's a lot of things where I'm like, yeah, I got this on lockdown. No, not this one.
Yeah.
I think that there is something to the fact that God's attributes are not at odds with one another. I think that's very important to
Oh.
understand. And I think that's really what's at heart at the doctrine of divine simplicity is, can you please shut that door, honey? Is divine simplicity is all about God being the great amen. It's all about him being completely affirmative in who he is. That means like we're a ball of conflict inside of ourselves. We have warring desires. That cannot apply to God. God is not
Right.
composite, I guess would be a word to use. We are composite beings. We are made up of many parts. These parts work together. I think at the core, our true self is simple in the same way that God is simple. Okay, I will give that. Because in my understanding, divine simplicity doesn't apply to personality. It doesn't apply to experience. It doesn't apply to volition. It doesn't apply to all of these other things that it seems to bleed through to. It just applies to a very abstract theological construct that is attempting to explain God from his most basic nature. And even that almost seems like a blasphemy to say most basic nature. It's like there's no degrees in God. God does not admit degrees, you know. So it's a lot of times like C.S. Lewis talked about how when we talk about spirit, it's easier to say what spirit is not rather than to say what it is. And I think this is one of those doctrines where it kind of reflects that, where it's easier to say what it's not rather than what it is. And if I were to make a simple affirmative statement, it would probably be very similar to Wikipedia's, which is that God cannot be broken down to any composite parts that compose him. That's redundant, I know. God is just God, is indivisible. There is no
Hmm.
dividing that. But what that does not mean, and this is where I think we get confused sometimes. What that does not mean is that there isn't complexity within God, and that's why. Did you check out the animation of the E9 or E8? Oh, yeah, the E8 here.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't go back and look at that. Well, I think I may have momentarily.
You've seen it before. Jared Leesey.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw it for a second there.
He applied it to a theory of everything with quantum physics, and he said that this is how all of these various particles emerge from this one primeval particle, this one singular basic particle. Um, and the idea behind the shape was it had so many dimensions of freedom that, as simple as it was, it could give birth to such deep complexity that you could. It's almost like the Mandelbrot stuff. You're familiar with that, of course. It's that
Uh, I'm trying to remember. I'm not as into geometry as you are, so I don't remember.
well, it's
I've seen it, but I just.
Isaac Asimov was obsessed with Mandelbrot set, and it was all about. Now, Julia set is just a plot on an X and Y chart. our Cartesian plane. A Julia set is a simple, elegant equation that graphs a trajectory. Well, the cool thing about the Mandelbrot set, and I can't quote it to you right now, even though I know it's really simple. I'm not interested in that part of things, so I don't memorize those things. But it's got like maybe 5 or 6 numbers and like 2 operations, and it's infinite. When you chart it, it doesn't go infinitely outward; it goes infinitely inwards, and you keep seeing similar iterations from macroscopic shape. But they're variations. There's slight
golden ratio. Is it like the golden ratio?
Not really, because the golden ratio is a static shape. The Mandelbrot set is dynamic in that you keep finding new things. You know, the golden ratio keeps. I think you're referring to the Fibonacci sequence, where the first number is higher, then the second number is lower, and then the third number is higher, but not quite as much higher, and the fourth number is lower, but not quite as much lower, and it gets closer and closer and closer to the phi ratio.
Okay.
But that's a static shape. The cool thing about the Fibonacci, the Mandelbrot set, it is a dynamic fractal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you can have a static fractal, which would be like a bunch of triangles infinitely recursive. Okay, that would be a static fractal. But a dynamic fractal, you keep getting new shapes. The further inward you go, it's new shapes, and they look a lot like the original shape, but it's new shapes. And I'll give you a link to the videos. I'll post something in the group. But that's why I wanted to. These aren't my ideas of the shape of God or who God is or anything. I'm trying to get people to think outside of the box, and trying to get them to think of how God can be both simple and complex at the same time.
Okay.
And I do believe very firmly that sacred geometry is the basis of all being. I know Yohanan focuses primarily on the physics aspect. I think that sacred geometry goes far deeper. It's the underlying fabric. It's the ones and zeros of the binary of reality, and that goes beyond this physical reality. We're talking about God here, and so I see so much complexity from such simplicity. But we can never, ever, ever simplify personality. And that's the thing that I worry about is we can't, when we say that God is love, well, God is also hate. And they're not in conflict.
You mean hate of evil?
Well, I'm not getting specific at all. What I'm saying is God feels hatred, or he expresses hatred. I know that I
wouldn't say that.
I was about to say that God can't be subject to feeling, and I recognize that the moment it came out of my mouth. When I say that God feels hatred, that's a dangerous thing to say. Jesus does. That's easy to say. Jesus, obviously, he was very, very disdainful of the money changers. He was. Go ahead. Sorry, I've been.
I would just say, I don't think there is a kind of a traditional version of saying that God feels things, but at the same time, I think when we're talking about impassibility, what we're talking about is that God doesn't impress upon or like forced or sort of like impress
he feels what
beyond
he
his will. Yeah. So God can make himself subject to our feelings. God can make himself sensitive to us, but it's all based upon his will, his fundamental will. And so that doesn't actually violate impassibility. It's a creative. This is kind of the way I understand that the early church fathers kind of reconciled impassibility with God of Scripture.
I agree with you. I would extend it further, though. I would say that, yes, God can make himself subject to his creation, but never fully. Fully in a moment, fully in principle, but not fully as far as eternally.
His essence. Right.
Oh,
yeah. Of course not. Yeah.
So, and this is, I think, a lot of the things. Sorry, it's my habit to talk into my hand. It's a bad habit. A lot of the things that I think primarily we tend to agree on the vast majority of theological issues.
Mm-hmm.
We get bogged down in the technical aspects because I really take the Pauline mindset where argumentum ad absurdum. You follow it to its logical end to see where it goes.
I do too. Yeah, I do too.
but I think we start from opposite ends.
Okay, yeah.
Like, because
Okay,
I
yeah.
have a lot of positive assertions and you don't. You have a lot of negations and I don't really worry
Yes.
about those. And that's
Exactly.
and I finally realized that when I had that whole challenge when I had said Justin demands specificity in everyone else, but he doesn't give it, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
well, mention that, and I must have I must have copy and pasted that little exchange probably 10, 15 times before I was like, it's not that, we're just coming at it from different angles, and
Okay, yeah, I see. I couldn't totally get my head around what the issue you're trying to bring up was. That now that you say that, I understand. I understand what you're talking about.
because I mean I don't. After a while, I mean, playing King of the Hill isn't any fun.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you have a positive assertion, the mindset that I've adopted is okay, if you have a contrary positive assertion, then let's bring that to the table. But if
Yeah.
you want to just poke holes in my positive assertion, it's kind of going to irritate me after a while because it's like, look, I'm not
Mhm.
perfect. I don't know every little aspect of it, but this seems to be true, you know? So
Mhm.
that's so I guess that's the J part in the INFJ, but I do tend to be big.
Yeah. It
I do
is. Yeah.
I do tend to be big on the positive assertions just because that's how we move forward. I mean, we can sit here
Mhm.
going in circles about what it can't be or how it may be, but there comes a point where we're going to be like, okay, I don't know this for certain, but it seems reasonable to assume that it's true. So let's just move forward assuming the truthiness of this.
Mhm.
I like Colbert, by the way. Truthiness.
Let's
So, oh, go ahead.
let's see. What was that tagline? What was that book title? He had something about "I am America and you can too" or something.
I don't even remember.
Johanan adopted it for one of his videos, and he said, "I am a process and you can too."
Oh,
when he was
jeez.
when he's trying to refute
Johanen's pretty. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
he was trying to refute those people who assert that consciousness is just a process. What were you? What were you
I'll
going to
tell
say?
you what. Johanan has one of the biggest egos I've ever encountered on the internet. Okay,
And some of
but
it's justified.
yes, I was just about to say that he's got the shit to back it up. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a genius as far as video editing. The way he
Oh
puts
yeah.
his videos together, it's just like it flows so quickly, and it's just like
Oh
I gotta
yeah.
watch that again. Like
No,
I've
I think
watched
it.
his Through a Mirror Darkly. I must have watched that like 5 or 6 times.
Oh yeah. As far as the narration and the writing goes, I mean, it's genius. I think he could use a
Mhm.
little help on graphic. I shouldn't, talk about that here, but I've talked to him about it before, maybe helping him out with the graphic uh, part. But anyway, okay. So
Let,
so
wait. Before you hold that, can you hold that thought for just a
yeah,
second?
sure.
Cling to it. Remember that thought. I just want to say this because this has come up a couple of times. Remember this, okay? When you're a public personality, everything you put out in public is
True.
fair game. So don't think
That's
it's
true. Yeah.
gossip. Don't think it's talking out of turn or anything like that. So we're talking about Johanan, who not only puts out YouTube videos, but has a public Facebook page. So we're not
Yeah,
trying
that's
to
true. I mean,
mischaracterize him. Okay. So I'm just trying to set because I've gotten the vibe a couple of times, not from you, but from other people that's like, well, we don't really want to talk about it. Why not? It's public. It's fair game. We talk about
yeah, he
Jennifer
did.
Aniston, Brad Pitt, all of that stuff. He's a Facebook celebrity when it comes to quantum physics. So
He
yeah,
tends not to
sorry.
care anyway. So
Nah, he don't care. He doesn't care about
yeah.
that shit.
Okay. So back to the main subject.
Mhm.
What I basically when you talk about how like okay, here's what I can agree with you with. I can agree with you that God being simple does not mean that it's simple for us to understand, or that we don't still see God through many different facets. That we can't just like see into the essence of God simply and like like everything like we have all these different facets through which to view God, and that's what the body of Christ is for, to like build up the knowledge through just all these different revelations. But at the same time, I don't think I agree with saying, strictly speaking, that there is. Well, actually, let me nuance this. I think I may agree with you, really, when you say, because you're saying that he's simple in personality, his nature.
He's not
But
simple like Gomer Pyle, is what I'm saying.
yeah, and this really feeds into David's theogony, as far as God willing.
Didn't you
Like
hear me frame it,
distinction.
or didn't you read me frame it? A couple of comments and a couple of different threads that I use that word. That this really is what this is coming down to, is theogony. I really wish that David wasn't so like taxed in his own life, because I think he could add a lot to this conversation.
Yeah. So obviously, as we're not Greek classical theists, we're talking about the Trinity, and so we're obviously there's I mean, if you have anything more complex than just one simple essence, then obviously you have complexity. Period. I mean, you moved into another category, and so you moved into the category you're saying there's three persons here, and then you talk about creation. God willing, creation is immensely complex, and this is the will and thought of God is behind it. So, and I think that's kind of what atheists are trying to get at when they they object that God must be complex to have created this whole vast creation. And in a sense, there's an intuition there that I think that is legitimate. But we would say behind all that is the will to have distinctions within himself and to create such an immensely complex tapestry. So that's what it comes down to, really, I think.
Here's one of the greatest challenges in all of theology is, how do you have a distinction without opposites? You get where I'm going with this? This is
oh yeah.
I think the question is unanswerable. I don't think my brain is capable of actually understanding it, because we only understand things in terms of opposites and distinctions, light versus dark. But God, in him there is no light or wavering of shadow. And I don't think our minds are capable of really grasping that.
Okay, two things that may be one thing. First of all, and wait till I'm done with the second thing. But first of all, we need to define what an opposite is, and second of all, you do have like God, the Father fully giving himself, and then the Son receiving. So, and I wouldn't say that in eternity it's abnegation, because there's nothing for him to put aside. There's nothing about the Father for him. But still, it's like there's a giving and a receiving. So those are like a distinct sort of opposite, I guess, depending on how you define it.
Can I clarify?
Sure.
Contrast is what I should have said. Not
contrast.
Opposites.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be a better thing. And you're kind of touching upon the necessity of the Trinity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I've noticed since probably a few years ago, I started noticing all these deep philosophical issues about how action can come from passivity and stuff like that, and realizing that really the Trinity solves all these like unreconcilable and like you just incomprehensible philosophical issues.
Right.
It's like amazing.
If you're going to have a personal God who relates to his creation, the only option is the Trinity, really.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have that impersonal, unmoved mover of Aristotle that doesn't feel, doesn't think, just emanates.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think that really resonates in any of our hearts. That doesn't have the ring of truth to it. And that, I hate to say it, look, I'm going to admit it to all the public. That's my final arbitrator. If something just, there's a part of you that's just like, this might be, this might not be, but there's some things that you just know, and some things that you know just ain't true. And that hits it right there to me. God knows me, and I know my God.
I agree with that. That was ample enough to tide me over for a long time. But I'd also say there's another angle to that, is that I don't think that the unmoved mover could be just some impersonal force, because you'd have to have what you call agency, and that involves both will and So I
I
really
think
think there is a rational aspect to it too.
I think we got to remember that Aristotle rode on Plato's coattails, and I don't
Hmm.
really think that he had many original ideas himself. I think he was just reworking things that he had heard, but that's
Yeah,
just my thought. It's not like
he
I'm not an
he
expert in
he.
classical Greek
Yeah,
literature anyway.
he definitely reworked things, and it's a nuance for sure. I don't know if it's a build. It's like, yeah, I think you're right, but it was a huge contribution at the same time. It wasn't like he was just kind of tweaking a couple things. He did change the philosophy a bit, so that someone could say I'm an Aristotelian rather than a Platonist, you know.
Yeah,
But there's
yeah,
too much to get into right here.
yeah. I know. Sorry, I was just using an example. But
No, yeah.
so is there? Do you think there's anything else we need to button this up?
Um, I would like to say, for the interest of time, that there isn't. I don't think, and I don't. Nothing comes to mind right now. I think we really do agree. I mean, now that we got into the and I would
Why
like
do
to
you think I
ask
always
people
want
if
to
we,
take it to a? Why do you think I always want to take it to these discussions?
yeah,
The text thing, it never works out right.
yeah, we could ask questions if people like really understand, like layman, type people, like, and if not, maybe we can do a subsequent episode where we kind of break it down a little more, in
Well,
case, you know.
I'll post a link to this video in the group, and I'll try to tag as many people as I think might be interested, and we'll see if we can
Cool.
get a discussion going on about this to see if we can find out what the problems are, how we can hammer this out and make it more specific. Because, like I
Oh
said,
yeah.
it's a doctrine that I continually wrestle with because I'm trying to figure out what I can say and what I can't say about God
Hmm.
reflecting His nature. Because I think ultimately speaking, and this will be the last thing I'll say on the issue. Don't worry, I'm not going to draw it out. Ultimately speaking, when we're approaching theology from a systematic standpoint, we're not thinking with thought. We're thinking
Yeah.
with we're thinking in abstract, and we're
Hmm.
working with something similar to ones and zeros in a meat computer in our heads, and the ones and zeros don't add up when it comes to personhood. It doesn't add up when it comes to volition
Right.
and moral agency, and we can't make it mathematical. And I've
Uh,
been struggling with this for quite a while now. This is not a small problem for me. I just think that it being just is. There comes a point where you just need to realize you're not going to find a
hmm.
technical definition. It just is. So that's
Yeah.
my final word.
Cool. Let me end with a couple of things that, for those who've hung on. Well, it hasn't been too long, so.
Not at all.
A good common, well, I don't know how common it is, but a good illustration for divine simplicity is, when you take white light and then you put a prism up to it, it'll break into the color spectrum. So you see all these different colors that are inherent in white light, and they're different aspects of the white light, but they have to be kind of distinguished from each other. And so God in His simplicity is like the white light, and then the different hues are reflected by different aspects of reality and different people within the body. So that's kind of an illustration of, and really we can start to see, God in His essence. But I don't think, since God is God's existence is equal to His essence, so we'll go on for infinity, discovering more and more, and we'll never fully just encapsulate God in just one glimpse. We'll just continually be discovering more.
And that's where open theists have their only footing. By the way, I just want to put that
Yeah.
in there. That's where they, just like kinists, there's always that element of truth that leads to the horrible error. And so that right there, what you hit right there, is where open theists get their teeth from.
Yeah. And then the other thing is I wanted to mention real quick is when you were talking about personalities. There's a good name for, I think what you're getting at is Gestalt psychology, which is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's basically a top-down thing where you're starting with an essence, and then you explain the parts from the essence itself, instead of like kind of building it from parts and say, well, these parts, when you put them together, they equal this whole, just by composing them together. And I think Gestalt psychology works well with thinking of, the source of personality is a spirit. That's, you know, and so that's I think that's a good way of looking at it. It's a good area of research. That there's a lot been put into that, and you know that's why I'm in the Kersey temperament theory, because it's very Gestalt like that. So those are a couple of things to help people kind of springboard off of.
Cool. I'll leave you with a question. I liked your
Okay.
illustration of the white light and the prism.
Yeah.
I would say that the prism can be multifaceted and break up into a lot of really complex things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And that explains a lot, but it leaves us with a really big problem. What is God without that prism? See,
What?
Don't answer. Don't answer.
I don't
Explain
understand why that's a question.
Because
I-
okay, let me. I'll just explain what I mean by that. Because when you talk about white light, you're talking about all the different wavelengths of vibration of photons, which we can break that down as to be. It doesn't even need to be complex like that. We can just call it potentiality. We can say that within this particular shape, we have all the potential in the world. And once we apply this lens to it, we can see this particular potential realize. Or if we look this way, we can see that particular potential. But what if we take the lens?
I see what you're saying.
Can God exist without his creation?
Oh, okay. That's originally the tone I thought you were striking with that.
Yeah, exactly. What is?
Yeah,
I'm not like I'm saying. You don't have to answer it now. I'm leaving it with the question of, this is the real challenge of divine simplicity. Once we really get down to the nitty gritty of who God is, if we can't go any further, he's either unfathomable, unexplainable, and completely undefinable, or he's nothing but a math equation.
Right, exactly. That, and for us, I would say, ultimately, this is what I was getting at, is that we can discover more and more and have completely, like, we can burst out of kind of like what do you call it, the Russian dolls, you know, like you're bursting it just out of greater and greater, like, shells, and
babushka.
you're having more and more, but yeah. So we can, and I wanted to use that to illustrate, it's like not just like adding new information, it's like a new paradigm change each time you go through this kind of phase change. But so we can have that sort of like expansion and growth, and it will never end. But I don't think ultimately we will ever know completely. That's what I was trying to get at.
So this is what I'm going to do. As soon as we end this broadcast, I'm going to, I think there's like 4 or 5 links. 3 of them are like short videos. A couple of others are little explanations. But there's things, I'm going to post this video. I'm going to post links under it. You need to check these out. Because
I'll do as soon as I can.
Yeah, you need to check out the E8. You need to check out the Mandelbrot set. You've already gone through the whole seed of life, flower of life, fruit of life shit, right?
I think so. Spirit science, or
yeah. Spirit science hits upon it a lot. There's the Kabbalistic version of it. There's many different perspectives on it, but they all agree on that core, the sacred geometry. So I'll post all that stuff, and I think it'll give you a really good idea of where I'm going, and you're gonna like it. You're gonna like it a lot, and it'll spark a lot of great thought. So I'm gonna draw it to a close unless you have anything more to say.
No, that's good. I need to get out here. So
anyone who stuck it out, I mean, wow, this is probably one of our shortest broadcasts. I think we're less than 40 minutes at this point, maybe 45. It's an issue we're going to continue discussing. One of these days, I'm going to twist Daniel Baber's arm and get him to talk about this, because I know he's just going to stir the pot. He's got everything to say that's going to undo everything that we just discussed. So it'd be cool to talk about it with Daniel. And I hope everyone just keep David Michael Gregg in your prayers. He's dealing with life like we all are, and he's been taking care of that. So that's his absence, and he can use our prayers just like all of us could. So Let's hope we can get him into the discussion. But until then, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you the next time when we just explain how we don't have a freaking clue about anything. Have a good night.